All right. We are live. It is Archon of Autark here for Axe to Grind. I'm joined by Joel on the fifth throne. Um, Joel, I was really expecting to see a fist on your throne. I do not see any fists on the throne. Where are the fists?
The fists are not visible. You have to sit on the fist. That's how it works.
Oh, okay.
Don't ask any other questions. You're not going to want
Yeah,
the answers.
we'll not be taking questions on this matter.
Don't
I
get you
understand.
demonetized immediately.
Yeah, exactly. All right, enough of the fists. Okay, so for those of you who don't know Joel, obviously I assume most of you guys know me. He and I have been chatting for several years now. He is a game designer with a philosophy that is near and dear to my own heart. He is one of the rare few brave enough to include domain rules in his RPG. And he is in the middle of doing a Kickstarter. So he reached out to me. He said, "Hey, man, can I come on the show?" And I said, "Yeah, man, come on the show. And we're going to talk about demons, cybernetics, kung fu, and domains."
Not necessarily in that order, folks.
Not in that order. So let's start with kung fu. So you're working on a kung fu RPG, or you've already released it, right? This is the source
Yes.
book.
Yep. The first source book, actually. Kind of my equivalent of you gave that wonderful Barbarians of Kanahu. What was that one?
Barbarian
Uh,
Conquerors of Cantilan, yeah.
yeah. You did that one, and then there was another one you released at the same time. I remember because my name is in the backer credits for that one because I got that.
Heroic Fantasy Handbook.
Yeah, those are good ones. This
Yeah.
is kind of my equivalent of that. It's not quite that enormity of scope, but I even brought in a co-author because
Nice.
there's a lot going on with it. So yeah, the core rules is very Fist of the North Stars anime style, like kung fu, like dark, gritty '90s action stuff. It's a very
Awesome.
not D20 system
Mhm.
because we've got plenty of those, and I feel like after ACKS, like why would you ever do D20 again? I think you pretty much perfected it, right? So yeah, it's a D10 matching system in the vein of ORE, and then this supplement is like my answer to the because I do a lot of inspiration from Exalted. This is kind of my answer to the Infernals and the Alchemicals, which they always put at the end of their line. It's the kick-ass like robot and demon heroes. They
Right.
always do that, and then they wrap it up immediately. So I'm like, I'll lead with it. I'll lead with my best foot.
Okay, so your inspirations are Fist of the North Star, which I saw
Yeah.
and is awesome, as well as Exalted.
Yeah, big Exalted guy. I actually ran
Nice.
Exalted a lot. I got kind of disenchanted with third edition because it got kind of like rules lawyery right around 3.5. And then
Yep.
I was into White Wolf at the same time that I was into third edition. Like that was like my entryway into RPGs.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like there wasn't a lot to contrast with it back then. And Exalted was really refreshing because it used an anime aesthetic, which was really rare in those days. Surprisingly, it's all over the place now. But back then, you had like Exalted and what Besom. There wasn't much. A
Right,
little
right.
bit of cyberpunk. Actually, you know what? Mechton Zeta did it too. So I got
Mechton
to give
had an
props.
anime. That was my introduction to anime role playing. Was Mechton? Yeah,
Mechton, you can do worse than Mechton Zeta do. That's a good game.
it's a good game.
Um,
Yeah.
but anytime Pondsmith writes anything, it's ingenious. So, but yeah, I ran Exalted as opposed to D&D for a while, and Exalted has its own problems. Like it was second edition I was running primarily,
Mm-hmm.
and then I backed third edition Kickstarter, and about the same time, Domains at War was coming out, and I backed that too. That's
Mm.
where I kind of stubbed my toe because I got a copy of ACKS, the first edition of ACKS, with that because
Right,
you could
right.
just add it on, right? And I started reading it, and it made me so angry because I couldn't understand what I was reading. Was
Mm.
actually baffled by it. And it was sort of my gateway drug though into the OSR scene, and kind of blew my mind with how you approached RPGs and like that kind of Beckney style of like, and like I think we've all read Philotomy's musings at this point where he talks about like the shared imagined space and how that's like an important aspect of how the rules work. It never occurred to me ever before that. It
Right,
was all either in the rules like it was Monopoly or it was pure fiat, and that there was this like space between those that was like the
right, right.
entirety of what actual role playing games are. So, yeah, it's my
Awesome,
journey.
awesome. Well, you've made a great journey. So we got a couple folks that rolled in to say hi. So Sig,
Oh
hello,
yeah,
good
let
to
me
see
look at the
you.
comments.
Let's see, Cell Socks. All right, glad to hear it.
Hey, tabletop
Tabletop
junkies
Junkie
here.
Game. What's happening, man?
Yeah,
Good to see you. And we got Esoteric Order of Nerdity. What is up, man? Oh, that's awesome. You will, TJ. You will. Yoda voice. Um, yeah. Okay. So Kung Fu. What I remember from Exalted It had that really cool divisions of like the different types of gods, and like the most awesome epic, so either there was solars or something had been booted from the universe, but now they were making a comeback. And then you had like their abyssal variants who were like the Dark Lords of the Sith. And it didn't have like these very complex skill chains of basically martial arts
Mhm.
feats. And so
Yeah, I
you
was
kind of
actually checking out the awesome graphic designs they did for those.
right,
Those were
you
interesting.
would
Yeah, because
build your you
yeah.
would build yeah, and you would kind of build your martial art based on how you built up your character, right? Like your different
Mhm.
skill chains.
Yeah,
So
it was a real build-based system, which made it a lot of fun to interact with, like, as an armchair player, you know?
yes. Now, did you go that route for your own game, Lone Wolf Fist?
Kinda. Whenever you do kung fu, I found almost every kung fu game, if you studied them broadly, they always have like the core system, and then kung fu is like this thing that's on top of them, and they're very
Right.
much in that space between like a feat and a spell. And again, that kind of makes sense.
Yep.
That's sort of how
Yep.
I think that's how you have to characterize it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did something similar. They have charms, I have techniques, but like there's a lot of okay, so if you play games, you are forced to deal with the consequentiality of design decisions that people have made.
Yep.
You know this, and like as a designer, you know you got to kind of commit to something that like early on, and as you go to play testing, you'd be like, oh no, that doesn't work. White Wolf, I don't think ever did a play testing phase really. I think they had a lot of like they had a real yes room, like a lot of
Mhm.
people that were real positive energy people that would fiat around real problems. And so what happened with Exalted and every edition I've ever played is that these charm trees are really brittle in terms of the
Mhm.
character concept you have to make. And they really are they're awkward and hard to actually like get into and play. So as a guy who had to run with the reality of that for years and how frustrated my players were, I did away with like prerequisites entirely. I was like, no,
Mm.
you can get whatever move you can find in this setting. The fun thing is finding it. Find the master, find the manual of
Ah,
esoteric
that's
knowledge and use
cool.
it. Yeah, well, it's much more. It gives you the same level of control, really, as a GM because they have to find where it is. You know, so if you don't want a certain power in your game, you can be like, that died out a few eons ago, whatever.
Right.
Um, and I don't know, putting the game back at the table instead of that whole armchair thing. It's kind of where I want it. I want people playing this.
So this is great. This is super clever because I've long thought there is a play space for that kind of character advancement where instead of getting magic items from adventuring, you actually get, feats, spells, whatever, techniques from adventuring. And it's not, oh, we went on the quest to get the +1 sword, but oh, we went on the quest to get, Iron Fist hand or something.
Yes.
My
Well, I mean,
question for
that's how it happens. So,
my question for you is this, and this is what I was never able to resolve in my own head.
ooh,
Um, when I'm doing a dungeon, let's say where the quest is to get, the sword +3 of giant slaying, at the end of that, there's one sword of giant slaying and one player gets the sword. How do you handle it in a group setting when they find the old master who can teach them golden skin? Do they all just be like, well, I guess we're here. Let's all learn golden skin, Bob? Like, how do you maintain niche and character diversity?
well, there's a couple of little things that you use, and I just took these from the wuxia genre because that's a very common thing. Everyone will come across the same ancient master. He's got the power of Buddha's palm or whatever. Do we all learn Buddha's palm? Uh, First thing, it should be expensive in terms of experience points, which are a really limited character resource to get a new power. You can just pick up a magic sword broadly,
Right,
but
right.
you can't pick up another 3 levels of paladin. Like that's way harder, right? So if they've already invested to get their XP, they've got to determine, okay, is it worth it to my character to be the second guy with Buddha's palm? You know,
Hmm.
the other thing is the relationship you have with that master is individual between characters. The master is an NPC. So the benefit of that is that he can like and dislike people with the same kind of randomness that a normal human being forms connections. And you
Right.
can track that. You have a system for tracking that, as I recall, with
Hmm.
like hirelings and things like that. I used a version of that to track how much favor you have with a master. So it's like, okay, do I want to commit to not only having the XP and spending it to this, but also getting onto this guy's good side? And the more powerful technique, generally, the deeper of a relationship you have to have.
Hmm.
Finally, like it's always a tactical trade-off, right? To figure out like what kind of moves you have. And these masters don't just have one super move; they've got a whole library of them. So you can maybe you don't want that deep of a technique with Turtle Hermit. You don't really need Kamehameha, but that thing he does, like the Destructo Disc, that could be useful. Solar Flare, I could learn that. So you can learn different powers from the same dude. So that's nice too. They act as a broader resource, like a library of moves. So those are my approaches.
Are there sort of implicit synergies between different powers that create niche protection? So that
A little bit.
if I've already gone down the path of, I don't know,
Magic sword, whatever.
fighting like a zebra style kung fu versus eagle talon. So there's certain advantages to kind of going down particular routes. And again, I'm asking, because I ran into this problem in a design I was working on where what happened was my very intelligent players all figured out what the very best option was, and they just cherry picked them all.
Yep.
And it was
and it's a real risk, dude.
They ended up all the same, and I was like, oh. So
well, you definitely want to make it so that the different powers all have drawbacks that make them all tactical considerations, right? Within a given kung fu style, there's a lot of synergy, but it also kind of pigeonholes you to a strategy. Like I've got a gun style in the game, it's post-apocalyptic. If you're really close to the enemy, that style loses a lot of power really quickly. Meanwhile, the spear style I have in the game is great for getting in close and trapping enemies. Like that's where you want to be, is that mid distance. So I thought about that a lot when I was designing the kung fu style. So there's an inherent synergy within a style to like work with itself. I was kind of scared about people mixing and matching styles and becoming really super broken. So my twofold approach to that is, first of all, if you're most of the different kind of characters you can have only have access to one or two styles, which if they overlap won't necessarily be super broken. And the only character archetype with access to like whatever styles they want at the very beginning have all kinds of drawbacks. The Ronin, like they're basically outcasts. So they either stole or otherwise got these styles through like these dishonorable means. So there's a big drawback to kind of balance out the potential brokenness of someone who's a more veteran player. Because there's no way anyone can know all the different powers and combinations. Like smart players are going to beat you, and every player is definitely smarter than me, no matter how good of a design I have. And then ultimately, the thing I feel like kind of arbitrates that rule is that you only learn styles by getting a relationship with a powerful master or finding a kung fu manual, which is like the equivalent of a magic item. So because there's gameplay until that point of brokenness, I feel like I can look at the potential brokenness as a reward for clever play. So unless it's totally game breaking, that should still balance out to more play than failure. That's the theory anyway.
Right. Well, I mean, the same thing is true of magic items. For instance, if you place a +3 plate mail, +3 shield, +3 cloak of protection, and +3 ring of protection in your dungeon, then you can't complain that if they give them all to one character, now he has an AC that makes him unhittable, right? That's the result of the play. Those are the treasure, and they've decided to go that route. If you don't want to take that outcome, then maybe you should avoid putting the very best protective item of the game in the dungeon, right? Like, same thing.
Yes,
All right,
true.
We got a question for you.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
Sig says, how much did the Shaw Brothers movies of the 60s and 70s and Pai Mei movies influence you?
Only seen like 2, I think, Pai Mei movies, and then Kill Bill, which I don't know if it classifies as a real Pai Mei movie.
I don't even know what a Pai Mei movie is. You have to tell me.
Okay. So, did you ever see Kill Bill? That'll kind of help a little bit.
I saw Kill Bill for sure.
Well, the master that trains Beatrix in that one is Pai Mei. I think he's based on an actual historical character, but that's not his only appearance. Like he's in a lot of those wuxia films. I think I want to say I've only seen 2. It's been a hot minute.
So Pai Mei is an actor.
No. Pai Mei is a character that's in the genre of wuxia.
Okay.
It's almost like saying King Arthur, right? Like
gotcha.
If King Arthur shows up, you kind of know who that is. Pai Mei sort of, I mean, he's infamous instead of famous, but yeah. So I would say I was reasonably influenced by Pai Mei movies. I've only seen a couple of them, although I love the character. When it comes to the Shaw Brothers movies, enormously. I love those movies. My friend Brendan Davis, I think that we all kind of swim in the same circles. Yeah, any award-winning game designer, Brendan Davis. We have a podcast where we watch horror movies and we watch wuxia movies, and he like introduced me to the world of wuxia. And like, so if he loves a film, he shows it to me. And so I've seen like Come Drink with Me and Bride with Like Hair and just on and on, like this huge smorgasbord of like great like wuxia films, and they're they're incredible, man. Like that's like they're hugely inspirational. Like if I ever have a need for like an idea, I'll just find some random. I'll ask Brendan. I'll be like, hey, what's a good movie? And it'll be like, oh, Snake and the Eagle Shadow, or what was Five Venoms was one that was huge. I was designing a hex crawl based on Five Venoms not too long ago. Gonna get back to it eventually, but kind of got sidetracked with the demons and robots in the short term. But yeah, I would say they're tremendously influential. The core influence is still trashy, violent anime of the '90s, but man, if you're doing kung fu games and you're not watching Shaw Brothers films, you're just wrong. I don't know what to tell you.
Amazing. All right, so we got a great question here from Venwin. Could Wuxia
Ooh,
or Zhangzia be made? All right, so I'm gonna have you answer first your thoughts because you've read ACKS II, and then I'll
I
give my
have,
thoughts.
I have. I would say that Shansha you shouldn't attempt with any D20 system until you're getting into deities and demigods level. Like the very first like steps into deities and demigods, that's where you're doing Shansha. Until then, Wuxia, yeah, absolutely. You could use the fantastic domain mechanics of ACKS and like you have this wonderful thing where your domains imply a leadership structure with like named character classes. That is the most Wuxia thing ever. Like when I think of like thieves guilds and things like that, that's exactly what you could do in a Shaw Brothers film. So I would say absolutely. I think you'd want to reflavor it aesthetically a little bit, but honestly, like you're really not far off from doing that. Oh goodness, yeah, I would say you could reasonably do Wuxia within it pretty decently. The only drawback I would say is like, well, no, I guess you do that too. Okay, so I was thinking about like maybe the combat wouldn't be good, but your combat's fantastic because you've got the cleave rule.
Right.
Cleave is really Wuxia, like just
Yeah.
scything through a bunch of minions. Yeah, no, you could totally do that next too. Why are you ever? Why would you play anything else? Go buy ACKS II, guys. Jesus.
So it's very funny. This topic is essentially the third rail of the ACKS II Discord. If you bring up Wuxia in the ACKS Discord, like instantly forces manifest in dark antagonism and a massive nerd battle breaks out. Because of
It's the
the
most Wuxia thing ever.
because of the aesthetics, right? Because about half of my audience hates that kind of wuxia style
Mm,
60. Well, I wouldn't say they hate it because they might love it, but they hate it as applied to their D20 fantasy. That's a better
sure,
way to put it, right? Like they don't want to cross those streams. And then the other half is
understandable.
like, I don't understand why you didn't do an anime aesthetic for the art for ACKS II in the first place. And by the way, experience points are actually a cultivation mechanic. And,
They are.
like, I mean,
They,
anyway,
you're not wrong.
yeah. Shock to hit points just lays it out. Axe is cultivation game. Yeah. So,
Precisely.
um,
Roku got
I
an axe too. I know the guy who wrote the third edition of Legends of the Five Rings, by the way, Rob Hobart. So like,
uh,
it might happen. We'll see.
yep. See, North Scorpion it knows it. He's part of those battles all the time. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I polled my users on what would be their favorite source book or supplement I could do, and I didn't think to do wushu because it's not a genre I know much about.
Oh yeah.
But I do know about like Japanese ninja movies and whatnot,
Oh hell yeah.
and a Shigeru Daimyo Shogun was well voted as a popular option.
Oh man.
So
Axe Wuxia supplement win.
yeah. So I would really need to have someone explain to me exactly what makes wuxia as compared to I don't know,
Oh god,
not
it's kind of vast. You sort of just have to start watching Condor Heroes and go from there. I think if you've gotten past 25 Shaw Brothers movies, you will understand it in your bones. And that you will not no longer you will have cultivated enough chi that you will understand it inherently as you
right,
become
right,
enlightened.
right, right. Okay, so it's just start with Shaw Brothers movies and watch those. That's
Oh
what
yeah.
you should do. Okay.
Yeah, Condor Heroes is like the core of the show. It's like the thing that started the genre. It's like the like Superman kind of. So if you
Right.
start with Condor Heroes, you cannot go wrong. I'd also highly recommend for you the what was it? Oh goodness. I have a version of it over here. It slips my mind at the moment. Romance of the Three Kingdoms. That's a rough one in terms
Right.
because it's huge, but
Yeah.
man, I've been working my way through it. Every single time they describe like some complete badass like Lubu just scything his way through an entire army, I'm like, oh, I want to do this at Axe.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. So let's see. An aid worker loading water says, "Watch Fist of the North Star, Bruce Lee movie." I've seen a bunch of Bruce Lee movies and Fist of the North Star. And then Venwin says, "Check out the books of Yin
Yep.
Yang, Smiling Proud Wanderer, and Heavenly Sword
Heavenly
and
Sword and
Dragon
Dragon
Sling."
Slaying Saber. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. The thing about Wuxia is you bring it up and people will be like, here's 500 must-watch movies. And the agony is they are not wrong. So prepare to dedicate some small but significant portion of your life to understanding this genre.
that's fascinating. It's fascinating. So someone told me recently, and I'm curious. It was actually my friend Thomas Umstattd. We did a podcast together. Then he came onto my live stream, and he was telling me that there is a different story cycle for Eastern stories versus Western stories, where the Western stories have a 3-act structure, while the Eastern stories, the Wushu stories, have like a 2-act structure that's sort of like
Yeah, that kind of repeats in the middle. It
repeats in the
winds up
middle.
being kind of like a 4-act structure. Yeah, it's definitely weird when you first encounter it. But again, after a while, you come to anticipate it on like an instinctual level.
Right.
The killing intent of that 4th act reveal comes, and you're just like, oh, I know someone's about to die and then be reborn as a Buddha. Like you'll just know. Two
Huh.
act structure, nice.
Yeah, that was good. That was really good. Shock to hit points. That was really good. Um, all right. So interesting. I feel like I'm learning a lot. I'm building my chi. Now you told me before the show you're a martial artist yourself.
Hmm?
So what did you study? What did you practice?
Oh, the only thing, let me see. I started with Taekwondo, which was like the thing you could learn in Missouri in like the early 2000s or late 90s, early 2000s, just when I
I'm
was like,
with you.
yeah.
Yep.
So
I did Tang Sudo, very similar. Yep.
yeah, Tang Sudo is freaking beast too. That is a brutal style. Um, but let me see. I did that, and then I got a book on Tai Chi Chuan, an abbreviated one. It's 120 form moving meditation exercise, and mine only had 60. But it was like this book from the 70s during like the Kung Fu craze, and it was literally just like pictures of a guy doing this stuff, and I kind of had to extrapolate how to do it from this manual. So I learned all 60 of those, and apparently, if you do the full version of Tai Chi Chuan, it's 120. It's just like those repeated. So I would just go through them twice. I did that for a while. I got another one. Oh, what was it called? It was like another like 70s kung fu craze. It was like called Learning Kung Fu, and it just went through all the different styles, like Hungar Quan, different animal styles, like dragon style and tiger style. And so I learned a little bit of the basics of all of those. I especially like because they would tell you like the forms, and they'd also tell you like some of the exercises you were expected to do if you were like a student of these. And the Hungar Quan one stuck with me because you had to get into a deep horse stance, which is murder, and then practice punching for 2 solid hours every day. And I got through about a week of that before I realized I could never be a Hungar Quan student, let alone master. But the other cool thing about that book is that in the back of it, they had a bunch of like ancient, like family secret kung fu scrolls that they translated. And
Oh
so they had
wow.
moves like the red sand palm, where you would like crush red sand between your 2 hands and then like meditate, and you'd like move your way up to ball bearings, and you were able to like do like chi attacks at someone and make them die from 300 yards away. And like that's insane, obviously, but I don't know. I love that they just put those in. Like, hey, yeah, maybe these are real. It's the 70s. We don't know. Um, that just lit
Wow.
my young mind on fire. This is the result of
So
that.
do you think the scrolls were real, or do you think that they made them up for the book?
Well, I don't know, man. I know I mastered red sand palm, so that was cool. And after I killed a few people, I decided to stop using it.
Let's see. Hang on. Someone said that the oh yep. I gotta update this with your stuff. One sec. I had made a dreadful error. One sec. One sec. We will fix
Happens.
this.
Are you sending them to one of my mini rivals instead? Curse you,
No,
Brendan
just
Davis! You got me again. Wait, what?
no, 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 not to a rival. Just to Thomas Umstattd's blog page instead.
Okay, well that's cool.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Hang on
Well, he's
here.
not yet made the list, so good for him.
You have a list?
What self-respecting kung fu master doesn't?
That's fair. That's fair. So have you have not then ever had the opportunity to train kung fu under like an actual kung fu master? Then you've had to be
Not
self-taught.
really. Yeah, no, it was a lot of self-taught stuff. I actually have a really weird backstory that I won't get into in great detail, but like suffice it to say, it made me weird enough that I thought making role-playing games as a secondary career is a good idea for a job. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but no, there's really no substitute for a real master. I found like as an adult, as I've actually seen people like go through the process, I'm like, oh, I was missing so much. This is little things like it's the same way with any kind of like skill. Like I've done a lot of like strength training lately because I got in really bad shape for a while there. But like I effectively have a tutor for that, and like actually having someone to ask questions to kind of observe your form and like that makes a huge difference, you know? So yeah, like, you really can't learn it from a manual. It's like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Like, yeah, sure, you can learn the moves, but it's not the same thing as really like understanding the art. You need someone to teach you that. So yeah, I mean, I did actually go to Taekwondo for a while, but again, it was an enormously different experience than like being able to learn it on my own. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, I did Tang Sudo. Uh, and at the time I did Tang Sudo, almost nobody knew what Tang Sudo was. They always were like, "Is that like Taekwondo?" Because Taekwondo was relatively well known because of all the tournaments and Chuck Norris, etc.
good old
Um,
Chuck.
and and it was interesting because but there was no there's no genre of Tang Sudo movies, right? Like you can see Japanese martial arts if you see samurai movies, and you can see Chinese martial arts if you watch
Yeah,
various
almost
wushu
anything.
movies, right? But up until recently, you never saw Korean martial arts in the movies, and it wasn't until sort of like the K-pop movement came to America that I actually discovered that there is a Taekwondo fight in every episode of a K drama. Like just
Oh, that's
randomly,
rad.
like every episode, they just break out into some sort of Taekwondo fight. But what really made me feel proud was when I discovered that Tang Sudo was the basis of Cobra Kai. Then I
Oh,
felt
that's so
I
metal.
I finally felt cool again. Um, so
God, they did such a good job with at least the first 2 seasons of Cobra Kai. I haven't seen the rest of it yet, but
yeah, it was really
man,
good.
like and like actually made me rewatch the first movie and like critically reevaluate it. It's actually a pretty beast movie. Uh, but
Yeah,
man, like I love that we see it. I love that we see the alternate perspective. It's like, oh no, I guess Daniel was kind of a jerk, huh? Like it
yeah,
was like, several times, like the everything had been resolved, and he decided to reignite it because he was like prideful and looking to pick a fight to change his place in the social pecking order. And it's like,
that's what it came down to. It was about a new
yeah,
guy wanting to change his place in the social pecking order. Yeah,
I think so. But yeah, also all the fights are extremely cool in Cobra Kai, so let it go. And like you're like really, really practiced at it too. Like it surprised me. So I mean, the thing about being like well practicing kung fu is you don't brag about it, but I'm pretty sure you could kill me if we ever got into a fist fight. So that's cool. I have
ha!
another reason to have terrifying respect of you.
No, 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 no. I trained pretty hard when I was a young man, but I'm very out of shape. I'm old. I'm old without being an old master. I'm an old non-master. I don't know what the
Should have
term is for
mastered Red
that.
Sand Palm.
I've mastered coffee grip. Yeah,
I actually just had some. Oh, there it is. I
yeah,
decided to drink my small mug.
yeah. Right. Yeah, yeah. Exactly. Coffee grip and 90 word per minute text.
Ooh,
So, all right. So
furious
tell us
fingers of
tell us
typing.
about the new book then. So demons and cybernetics.
Yeah, pretty much. So 90s anime was probably the golden age of anime in my estimation. Maybe that's when I got
I
into it,
agree.
and it's
Yep.
like that's it's a little bit of nostalgia there. But honestly, like it was all hand drawn stuff. It was all cell animation. It was some of it was absolutely brilliant. Like I'd never seen anything before or since that has the kind of like first of all the enormous detail that's in that stuff, but also just the visionary directing. I mean, like they changed cartoons about as much as like Seven Samurai changed cinema. It's
Hmm.
just unbelievably different and brilliant. So you can't fit all that into one book, even if it is nearly 400 pages long. So I neglected a lot of the really cool robot animes like Battle Angel Alita and Armitage the Third. On and on and on. What was that? Cyber City 009. Like there's a bunch of really cool stuff that happened back in the 90s with like robots and cyborgs, and they needed a home. So, obviously I had to rewatch all of them 30, 40 times in a row each constantly since I started writing it.
Oh, wow.
As inspiration, I cannot get enough of these anime. And like in addition to that, like there's a lot of cool demon animes. Devilman pops to mind, but I mean, like even like recent ones, like what was it? Chainsaw Man is a really, really good like demon anime, and those needed a home too. So I watched a bunch of those, and I was like, supplement. So I took inspiration from the Exalted line, and I was like, I really like their cool anthropomorphic hell. I think I could combine that with the Chinese underworld and like Indian mythology and make something really cool of my own. So I've scoured. Actually, I've got a huge appendix in. My Discord forced me to write an actual appendix in this time, and I was going through, and it's got like the Rig Veda and like the Pali Canon on it. And I'm like, well, I didn't read all of it, obviously,
Right.
but like, oh my god, the myth cycle in like all Eastern myth cycle is cool, and I know that because I've pretty much seen all of it at this point. It's really inspirational stuff, and like so I took the idea of the Infernals and like the demon based Exalted, and they're like their hell is like Tartarus. It's made out of the bodies of the vanquished titans, the enemies of the gods. I really love that mythology, so I base my hell around that same kind of concept. So I call it Naraka, which is I think it's the Indian version of hell. And it's the cool thing about like Chinese and Indian hell is that it's vast. It's not just like fire. There's like a bunch of different kinds of hells you can go to, and they all have all these different nifty tortures. So yeah, all the different landscapes, I base them off of. Broadly, I call them Ashura because A, Ashura is a cool term, and then B, it sort of kind of means what I mean. It's like the Ashura are kind of like demigods sort of thing, but they're all sort of evil. Not evil necessarily, but like wild and primal. So all of these like really powerful like Titan gods, the Ashura, vanquished by mortal heroes. They're too big to die and reincarnate, so they just kind of drift down and their bodies turn into the landscape of Naraka, which is the hell. And they're still seething with rage because they're giant evil primal monster deities that are on the verge of death. So they'll make like Faustian bargains with heroes that can't quite make it into the kung fu realm, and they turn into the damned heroes, which actually not only have like cool kung fu, but that same like primordial power is poured into their souls and gives them this like reckless and transhuman element, which is really, really nifty. And then the other side of that, the robot side of that, like again, the alchemicals is what I drew inspiration from there, and their backstory in Exalted is cool too because they had their own primordial who was like the dweeb primordial, who's like the big robot, and he got scared when the Solars came to the scene. He's like, okay, they're gonna kill me. These people are insane. I got to get out of here. So he grabbed a bunch of his followers and he just like banished himself to another universe. He banished himself to the Shadow Realm, and he made this like steampunk planet out of his innards. And he's like, okay, humans, keep me running. I'm going to go dormant. And then like in 1,000 years or so, I'll wake up and we'll go back. The Solars should have burned themselves out by then. Except the people that he brought into him didn't know how he worked. So they just cannibalized his little wake up clock and made cities out of it. So now he's just stuck out there for eternity. And so I was like, that's incredibly cool. And instead of having Exalted, they had the prototypes for them and made robots that were like the congealed souls of a bunch of their heroes that they artificially reincarnated into them. I don't go quite that far, but I've got a big floating city of robot dudes. And the weird thing about their setting is that they made it super communist. So like all the little nations are like versions of communism. And so I decided to do that too. But I don't have a rosy view of communism, unlike the people that wrote this game. So all of mine are some variety of dystopia. So I've got like 3 huge dystopias, and instead of having kung fu heroes, they have a little bit of that. They just discovered how to do magic kung fu, and they have like robots they designed with more or less human souls that can turn into huge transformer things or learn kung fu and become more or less fully human. So that's what's going on with the supplement. I've got it's those different character archetypes and all the associated bestiaries and like all of the setting in yeah, that's what it is. Jeez, there's a lot. It's big.
It's awesome. How big is the book?
I have decided it's going to be no bigger than 250 pages come hell or high water.
Okay.
So
So that is a hefty tome. This is not like a rules light 64-page source book with.
oh,
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
No, I was talked into making a fat tome by my Discord. Curse you all. Curse you all, my
No,
greatest fans and supporters.
that's how you do it. That's how you do it. So, from what you've said, it sound now. I'm a big fan of. I call them, cross media franchises. I think
Mhm.
role playing games are a really excellent way to
Absolutely.
start a cross media franchise. In fact, I did a survey of this, and if you look at the top 20 cross media franchises on the planet, um, 4 of them come from board or tabletop or role playing games. Only one comes from movies, which I thought was really
Whoa.
interesting.
That's kind of
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
yeah, and so from what you're describing, the world you're creating sounds like also like a cross media franchise. Like you could do comic book set, manga set in this universe. You could do anime set in this universe. You could be what's that? Royal Road, is that the website now where they do they do like the light art, the light novel
Oh
serializations,
yeah, yeah. I
right?
think that's it. Is it Royal Road? Oh,
It's
I don't read a lot of light
Royal
novels.
something, I think. I'm sure
Yeah,
someone in the comments will tell us. Yeah.
most of the light novels I read are stuff like Demon City Shinjuku or Vampire Hunter D. So basically, there's one Japanese author I read.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I haven't read too many light novels. I've read a few. It's funny what you were saying about 90s anime. So, Royal Road. Okay, so
Yeah, okay,
origins of
excellent.
Royal Road. So, I look back on my memories of 90s anime, and I remember these really intricately drawn, highly detailed, incredibly bloody, gory, dark stories, right?
Mhm.
And so then I will go and look at recent anime, and people are like, "Hey, you should check out some anime." And I go and I, "Wh- what is this? This isn't the same genre. What happened to the anime I like?
Yeah, it feels
It's like
very different nowadays.
it's like, you know, girls in school outfits, and there's magic and fairies, and everything is cute, and it, it's just horrible. It's
Oh,
just
you got to
horrible.
be careful with that because like that magical girl Monica is pretty rad. The guy who does oh, what does he do? Is that that wonderful Wuxia puppet show too? I can't remember the name of it. Something Thunder. But yeah, he does Magical Girl Monica, which is it looks like a cutie saccharine thing, but if you actually watch it, it's this bleak and miserable, hyper violent action anime, which is really really good. So you got to be cautious with that. The appearances
W-
can be deceiving.
Why would you make a hyper bleak action anime cute?
I think it's to actually honestly subvert your expectations in a
I
clever
don't
and interesting way.
I don't like
Um,
having my subversions expectated. It's not I don't like that. I want
yeah,
I want
I
I want
I
my
honestly
expectations fulfilled.
I like having my expectations fulfilled too, but I really liked Monaco, so I, to each his own. I will say the majority of anime disappoints me nowadays. Back in the '90s, it felt like every single thing we got was gold, and nowadays I feel like we're getting more, but we're also getting more trash. There was always a lot of trash. We just didn't
Yeah.
see it 'cause it
Yeah, of
didn't
course.
get ported over. I
It didn't
think.
make it over. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
always.
Yeah, like not everything can be Ninja Scroll, right?
Right.
Well, well, that
Right.
and, I think animation styles have changed a lot too. I was in I think it was Daddy Warpig's podcast recently, and they were talking about how apparently even like the actual like physical like paint that they used to make all of those was made by one guy who's dead.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, I
like,
read that
oh
too.
yeah, that's surprising, shocking, and heartbreaking all at the same time.
Yep. 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 And of course
But
nowadays most of it is digital, so it has a different
yeah,
has
well,
a different
digital can be good, but
yeah, yeah, no, it can totally
yeah,
be great. It just is a different feel. But yeah, I guess I lost interest in anime when it stopped being predominantly about giant robots and people killing each other, and they moved into like other genres.
wow, what a
And
golden
again,
age.
I recognize that that's an illusion in that the genre was always broader than that over in Japan. It was just what reached us here in the U.S. Like my first exposure to anime was literally a bootleg copy of Akira
Oh,
with a fan dub, that we watched on VCR, and we were like, "What
God.
is this?"
Oh,
Um,
Akira will melt your brain if you're not ready for it. I was rewatching that a couple days ago because, I mean, it's me, of course. But Jesus, I was showing it to somebody who'd never seen it for the first time, and they were just like, "Oh my god!" They were utterly spellbound,
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
just
yeah. No, exactly. You're like,
so.
what is, and the end of it, you're just like, what is going on? You
I
know?
feel like I've achieved enlightenment every single time that the end title starts, like the credits start rolling. I'm just like, I'm a Buddha once more.
Now, are you a Buddhist? Do you practice enlightenment in your day-to-day living?
Uh, well, okay, not exactly. I'm an absurdist, which is like all the hard parts of Buddhism and none of the good parts. So
Mm.
you
So
just
you sort of go through all the suffering, but you don't actually expect enlightenment and a nirvana at
nah,
the end.
not even a little bit. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my nirvana can be found at the bottom of a cup of coffee, and that's about as much as I ever really will demand of the universe. Just keep making caffeine.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
I do
That's
like Buddhist. I really like I Shanghaied a lot of the cool stuff from Buddhism. Like my XP system is based on karmic deeds. So
really that's
yes,
cool.
it is. Well, I'm sure you wrote that wonderful superhero game. What is the name of it? It's
Ascendant.
escaped me in the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
ascendant.
send it. So you, like me, have actually read and probably played a ton of the old Marvel superheroes game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's the karma system from that
Yep.
game. That's what it is, and
Oh,
that's a
that's great.
brilliant system.
Yeah.
It drives gameplay really well, right?
Yep. Yep.
They have a reason to have social connections. They have a
Yep.
reason to do heroic things. And when they do non-heroic things, that can also that
Now,
also makes a difference.
in Phase Rip in the Marvel superhero RPG, you could actually use your karma like luck points in
Good.
gameplay. Now, is the same in your game, or
Oh, no,
is it just strictly XP points?
it's not super strict. Like for example, if you get like it's a post-apocalypse game, so a lot of the stuff you get is scrounge. If you scrounge yourself a weapon, and it's not like a weapon, but you use it like one, then you can spend karma, and it becomes that weapon only for you. It's like your signature thing. So like, there's a
Nice.
couple of little things like that in it.
Right.
Um,
So
I don't have a lot
you
of.
find an umbrella and you treat it like a katana, and now it's a
Yeah,
katana when you wield it.
but only when you wield it because you spent
Right.
the XP on it, baby.
Right.
So yeah, there's a couple of little things like that.
That's really cool. That's a good innovation. I like that. Explains why you get these characters with these weird, carrying these weird weapons, and yeah, that's
Yeah,
cool.
you really can't have things like Final Fantasy throwing anchors at people and suplexing trains unless you're are willing to think a little creatively about how characters can interact with your system. So
Yeah, no, that's clever. So you told me before the show that I'm supposed to ask you about domains in your game. So let's
yes,
talk
okay.
about, yeah.
Well, okay, so I did not comprehend, like, when I encountered your game the first time, I had no idea what I was getting into, which was a really good experience. It was like, oh god, you ever played that game Getting Over It by Bennett Foddy? All right,
Mm-mm.
so Getting Over It, you're just a little man in a bucket, and you use a hammer, and you've got to swing it around with your mouse, and you climb this legit mountain, and it's just the most agonizingly frustrating experience at first, and then as you kind of get the actual skill of it, because you have to develop a skill to play this insane game, like it becomes rewarding that your skill has produced something actually satisfying. You have
Right.
something to show for it, and it's an unrelentingly difficult game where you can't die, but you also can't win until you've truly mastered the mechanics.
Mm.
So that was Axe for me. I was like, what is this? And I would keep like slipping down and like having to like crawl my way back up. But like, man, it teaches you some really important lessons about what RPGs really can be. So, domain rules. I had no idea what I was getting into with that. I didn't understand GP for XP. The demographics of heroism was baffling to me when I first encountered it, and as I actually learned how to use that by running Axe for a long time, every time someone was like, "Let's play fifth ed," I'm like, "Let's play fifth ed, except let's use the rules from this book and the classes from this book. Actually, throw your fifth ed books into the fire. Let's just play Axe. Let's play Axe again." I kept trying to hybridize it, and then I eventually just discarded everything that wasn't Axe.
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned from domain play is that it serves an enormous amount of really important practical function in an RPG. I'm preaching to the choir here, you know. But like I'm also like telling you about like my own personal soul journey with this. And
Sure,
like
sure.
there just got to this point where like characters wanted to do more and invest in the setting, but they also wanted to still be the kind of people that were like kicking down doors and starting ball fight, like bar
Yeah, yeah.
brawls. And that's kind of like whenever players want to put their graffiti big enough that it's changing your hex map, that's domain play,
Right.
you know? So I knew I was going to need that. You get to the point in power with characters that you can like legitimately blow up a city. And I needed to give them a reason where they wouldn't want to just do that, right? I don't just want them
Hmm.
walking into a city and blowing it up and that to be the rest of the campaign.
Right.
So I made methods to reward them in terms of like, the setting, caring about them and like taking their ideals and their XP mechanisms and all that and rewarding them for it by engaging with it and changing it on that like macro level. Um, I base it on a lot of the stuff you did in X. I actually had to research real world like economic systems, and I actually changed my major in college. I was a chemist at first, and then as I got more and more into this stuff, I was like, I actually am kind of obsessed with economic thinking, and I became a business major. I didn't get all the way
Oh
into
shit.
economist. Yeah,
Wow.
so yeah, again, you massively changed the way my brain worked. By the way, chemistry
Wow.
is really boring and dangerous, and I would sweat a lot in my little goggles. So
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
became really, really dangerous. And I had a professor with anosmia who couldn't smell because of stuff that had happened in the laboratory. And I'm like, you know what? Probably won't rob me of my vital senses the rest of my life. Math.
It's true. It's true.
It
Yeah.
does have other unanticipated consequences, but yeah. So yeah, I got my bachelor's of science and business administration and did a lot of broad reading. Actually, on the RPG pundits forum, I got something recommended to me, an essay on economic theory, and reading that kind of changed the way I looked at the world because and I'm sure you're familiar with it. You read broadly too, and that's like one of those
Are you
cornerstones.
talking Richard Cantillion's book?
Yeah, yeah. Is
Yeah,
it Cantilan?
I've never
I
known
have
how to
no
pronounce
idea
it.
how to say that right. 'Cause I don't think that's actually a French name. He was like Irish or something, wasn't he?
Recommendation.
And he pretended to be French or something. I don't remember the specifics of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I'm talking about his text, and I really like the way he thought because it was almost tautological, right? Like he would tell you about like just the observations he had of the world and then how they connected, and then he would like just say, okay, but what are the incentive mechanisms of the decision makers here? What does that do? What's the consequence of that? And that was like once I read that, I understood Axe. That was like
Mhm.
the moment it truly like all the little gears clicked together and
Yep.
I saw a new world. And I wanted to do that in my game. And so I was like, okay, well, how do you do that?
Yeah, yeah, easier said than done, yeah. Yeah, no, Richard Cantillon or Cantillon, I don't know how it's pronounced either.
Mm,
Um, he was actually very inspirational for the economic system in ACKS, and I cite him a couple times in the rule books. So,
that's
it's
an
cool.
underread text, by the way. Like if you're
It
studying economics, then
is.
you need to read that book, An Essay on Economic Theory by Richard. Maybe it's pronounced Cantillon. That's how it's spelled.
Yep.
No
Yeah,
one knows. It's a mystery.
it's interesting because he gets basically no respect within the Western speaking, the English speaking community. Everybody reads Adam Smith, but Adam
Yeah,
Smith
yeah,
was riffing on Richard. Was Richard,
100%.
and 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 this is a problem I have with a lot of the way we teach nowadays. So, for instance, people like to shit on Yomini, the Baron who wrote the Art of War, that sort of summarized Napoleon's way of fighting. And people crap all over it and say, "Oh, there's you won't learn anything from it," and blah 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 blah. But if you actually read him, you realize that he laid out the entire framework of operational art that's still used today, like all the terms and things. He laid them all out first. He defines them all, and so you're sort of like going back to the primary source material. And yeah, you're not going to fight a battle the way he says you should fight a battle anymore. But holy crap, is it liberating to like get back and actually see it all laid out instead of getting the photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. And that's how
Yeah,
I feel
and
about
you're beautiful, and you're avoiding that mimetic of, oh, you can just skip that. Don't believe the mimetic in this case. Like, actually go to the
exactly.
primary source. It's enlightening, like you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, hugely so. Um, well, good. So we've given everybody their homework, everybody. So I hope you're all taking notes. There'll be a quiz tomorrow. And verbal quiz. We'll quiz you online. All right. Anyway, so domain play. So tell us about what you went with for domains for Lone Wolf Fist.
Okay, so you were able to use I think you used a silver piece, and like the way you did it was you got the value of a certain amount of land, as I recall, and then you turned that into a silver piece value, and that was like the root of your economic system.
Yeah, it was the amount
Um,
of wheat. It was the amount of wheat you could produce from a particular amount of land. Yeah.
yeah, and that's brilliant. I didn't want to go quite that detailed with it. I'm not super interested in the historicity of like, because I don't know that we really have a post-industrial apocalyptic setting that I want to investigate in enough detail that I can get like real solid data off of it. I was more interested in just doing like the fiction, but I still wanted something that had enough verisimilitude that it like kind of felt right, and it was so lightweight enough that GMs and players could use it. So I did something kind of similar. Like I didn't have and wealth is one of those things where like depending on your post apocalypse, it might be worthless. One of the first scenes in Fist of the North Star is a guy fleeing from a city with a giant briefcase full of money, and it gets thrown on the ground by people that are assaulting him, and it just blows away in the wind, and they're just laughing about how worthless it is. And it's like, yeah, so that could be money all of a sudden. That's kind of the fun of the post apocalypse. So for me, I was like, okay, but what would they actually use? And I actually got inspired by Ninja Scroll because the plot of Ninja Scroll, as it turns out, is getting a bunch of wealth together so that they could build an army and conquer Japan. And I was like, I
As you
want
do.
that to be, as you do. I mean, if you're going to conquer Japan, obviously you want to be the shogun of the dark and learn immortality first. That's just, you don't have to say that out loud. It's so obvious. Um, but yeah, so I was inspired by that. And I was like, I want that to be a plot that players can stumble upon and interrupt or even enact if they're of a mood. So like I wanted to have like value in terms of like, okay, if there was an emerging society, like, and they had a certain level of like a market, and by the way, your market ratings just completely ripped off that idea. It's brilliant. I'm really nerding out talking to you. You
It's
actually know
all
what I'm
good,
talking
man.
about. It's wonderful.
It's all
But
good.
yeah, so different levels of like sophistication in terms of like property laws and like what people can realistically like invest time and effort in to think to get a return for feeding their family and building their own wealth and societal credit. Like that's going to determine what goods are available in a place. I love
Mm-hmm.
that idea, and again, that accords with actual real history to a really 1-to-1 degree. So I stole that, and it made it so that I could just kind of describe like a given area, like a given like place, town, whatever, and just say, okay, well, what level should they be at? And you can either work in terms of like thinking about it descriptively and then working backwards to the mechanics, or you could start with the mechanics and say, okay, what does that imply about the setting? Since they kind of communicate with each other, it was really lightweight, and because it's only just a little tag you're putting on something and like a list of available goods, it's not a lot of extra bookkeeping. There's literally
Right.
like a chart in my book, which is if you're in a market of this size, what kind of goods are available and how much do they generally cost? It's one chart, like it's one
Yep.
page worth of stuff. And it's
Yep.
easy to do if you do the hard work, which is going and researching like, okay, well, how much food would it take to make this level of like product in a given environment?
Right.
So for me, like, yeah, food was like the core resource, and then I've got I categorize it along the elemental thing. So I've got like fire resource, earth resource, air resource, and I had to get a little creative. Fire resources like gasoline because it can make
Sure.
fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, sure, why not? Air resources or ammo, bullets, and things like that. And then I had to make because I had these rules. I then had to make army rules so that if you were fist fighting an army, like would that actually be a challenge? I dislike games in which they kind of hand wave that, where it's like you're just doing a normal combat, but they're just describing it like you're fighting an army. I
Right.
like domains at war, where if you're fighting an army, the amount you peel off as a hero, like it's a real challenge. Like
Right. Right.
how much of a risk am I going to take? How dangerous is this? And there's just enough abstraction that it's a very different kind of thing. Which, by the way, God, Domains at War is good. Can I just tell you how amazing? Like, what is that one page you have where it's got the guy with like the little hook sword, like just diving into the army? Everything about that and around that, for me, like that's the pearl in the middle of Domains at War. Like all the brilliant writing on either side of those things just blossoms out like this peony lotus of gory, like Beckme style enlightenment. Um, it's a beautiful product, dude. Like, I'm so happy my name is in the backer section of that book because it's
Oh,
freaking
I'm
awesome.
glad you dig it. Yeah.
Oh, I've
I'm
used that so many times, dude. I love that system. I'm
so
gonna keep
most
getting derailed.
most of Domains at War campaigns has been integrated into ACKS II, obviously. I'm working on a second edition of Domains at War Battles, which I'll end up releasing at some point. I might even do miniatures to go with it.
Oh man.
There's a group that does 3D printed miniatures that can kind of print them at a pretty good scale for me at an affordable cost. And if we do them at 6mm scale, they can basically
Ooh.
be the correct size given the ground distance and everything. And so you'd actually have like your cool little, phalanxes and hoplites and shit like that.
Oh, that's
So
rad.
so that
Is
could
6 millimeter close to that? Like, I don't know. I'm getting kind of into the weeds here, but isn't War Master at about that scale, where it's got like the stands and it's got a bunch of little dudes on them, or is that like a different
nope,
scale?
that's it. That's the scale. Yeah.
Oh yes, I can finally use my War Master miniatures again.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if War Master is exactly 6mm, but that's basically it's the idea. You have stands of troops and they're kind of tiny guys in formations.
Oh man,
Um
you just got a lifetime supporter again.
uh,
I regret only that I can dedicate one lifetime of passionate gaming to Axe.
It's very kind. It's very kind. I wish my local gaming group was so enthusiastic about my products as the people online are, Like my local gaming group, there's that like, in the Bible, you get like the vibe that in Jesus's hometown, like they don't really pay him the respect that they're supposed to. Um and it's the same thing here, right? Like I'll roll in, I've done all this work, they've all got their name in the credits, and then it'd be like, yeah, but yeah, have you guys read the rules? And they're like, what?
Rules.
Why would we read the rules, Alex? Yeah. So,
If you
well.
read these manuals, you will achieve enlightenment, people. So I
Yeah.
highly recommend them.
Yeah.
Um, God, yeah. So where do we? I derailed again. I was talking about. Okay, yeah. Okay, so um,
So you were talking
basically,
about the market avail. You have market availability, so you have an
right,
economic
and
basis. Yeah.
right, and you need a place to get that stuff. And I really liked this idea. So I I have like resource nodes, and in these nodes, initially what I had was a certain amount of stuff that was there, and you had to mine it out. But I changed that to being the amount of people you send to work on it determines how much you get out of it at the same time. And like more skilled people give you more stuff.
Oh,
Um,
that's cool. Yeah.
right, and the more sophisticated of a structure you have helping you get that stuff makes it better, and that works the same way with all the stuff. So like food resource, if you develop your agricultural infrastructure, you put money into it, they build better machines and they're able to harvest more. And the fecundity of a place in terms of like either it's like material goods or like the amount it can grow and all that is just determined by like a 1 to 3 point scale. It's either crummy, it's poor, or it's standard, or it's a rich node. And so going to a given place, like when you're like, because you get to that point, when you're exploring the hex map and you're strong enough, you can fight off the monsters, just like in old school D&D. And you'll kind of be wandering around this giant hex map that you've made, and eventually they'll find a resource that no one else has claimed, or maybe someone way weaker than them has claimed. And if they want to take over it and profit from it, you want to have just enough crunch that they can do that without having to like get super deep into the spreadsheets. This is a rich gold mine. So if you
Yeah.
have X amount of people, working at it for Y amount of time, you'll get Z amount of resources. That's
Yep.
nice and
Yep.
easy for them to understand. And they're like, oh, we can buy a tank with that. All of a sudden, they're doing domain play, whether or not they were trying to do
Realize
domain
it.
play.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Yep,
course.
exactly. You want it to be just that slick and play. Um, I'm resisting the urge to compliment Axe more, but let's just say that works in Axe as well. And it works in terms of making your setting. So if you're like making your big hex map, then a big hex map is a good idea. If you read Arbiter of Worlds, you know that, as I have, because Arbiter of Worlds is great. Plug in that too. It's a good little manual. It's beautiful.
Thank
But
you.
like, yeah, big hex map, good idea. And sometimes all you need to make a hex interesting is one monster and one thing that the players can use in a domain to
Yeah.
change the name of the game. It
Yeah.
works. Oh,
Yeah.
God. But yeah, so those are and
That's awesome. It fires me up that you've included domain play. I think there's been a few trends that have emerged over the last few years in, let's call it, the non-traditional or the non-D&D space, right? One of them I think is domain play. Another is the one-to-one time that people are
oh yeah.
adopting.
Actually,
And then
I've got a book. I saw that you interviewed the guy that wrote like literally wrote the book on the 1-to-1 play. I need to get that read. I've
Mm.
got it. I've got the bloody thing sitting on my shelf, and I've not read it. And it's like Arbiter of Worlds. It's thin, and I can feel its power.
Oh,
I
you're
need to.
talking about John McGowan. Yeah, I had
Yeah,
John
yeah,
on.
McGowan. That's
Yep,
the fella. Yeah, I
yep,
follow him on Twitter too, and
yep.
he wrote a book, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give that a read. Because yeah, that cropped up like what a year or so ago, somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
And at first, I was like,
it went mainstream about a year ago. They had been developing it a while before that. There's a fellow named Jeffro Johnson, a fellow named B Dubs, a couple others that are real active on Twitter, have all been in that space and doing some really interesting things. Now that they've kind of they've figured out 1-to-1 time. Now they've switched over to Bronsteins, and they're talking about
oh yeah, no, I've
Bronsteins all
seen
the time.
Bronsteins. Bronsteins are pretty cool too.
Same group of guys. Yeah, same group of
Oh
guys.
wow,
Yeah.
kind of cutting edge there.
Yeah, they're definitely, pushing RPGs into new and interesting directions. They would say they're pushing RPGs into old directions, but I don't think that that's
I don't think I've ever heard anyone do 1-to-1 time like they did before it became popularized about a year ago. Like, and I've read a little bit of that book, and like the method they use makes a lot of sense. They basically use it for downtime as a
Mhm.
pacing mechanism for like a troop style play thing. That's brilliant.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
I like that too. Like because I made my game pre 1-to-1 time, I had to think of another way to do that. So I just used montage scenes as like
Uh,
basically a 3 month chunk of time that were like that's how long a domain turn lasts. So if you wanted
oh,
to play
nice.
during it,
Yeah.
but oh, that's the other thing I did. Okay, I love this. So because there's like a domain level play, what that does is creates consequential events and movement in the setting that you encounter as like ongoing things if you're just
Right.
playing it.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I like again, I think I stole that from you. But like I like this really formal method for doing that. So if you're like one of those GMs who's absolutely insane, like myself, and you're like, okay, so what is Rao doing? He's moving this gold here, this army there. That's happening during that course of time. So these players are going through that plot arc. It is like 1-to-1 with that domain turn, and they can
Yeah.
interrupt his plans and do stuff. And I thought that was really
Cool.
fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Um, the uh, the 1-to-1 guys, I think you're right in that they claim that they've sort of quote rediscovered how D&D was meant to be played, but I don't actually think that even in the early era D&D was played like that very much. Maybe by Dave Arneson's group for a period of time, maybe by Gary's group for a period of time, but pretty rapidly it wasn't played that way by anybody. And in a sense, they remind me, how like in the Renaissance they kind of rediscover classical art, and so they start doing, neoclassical statuary, and they erect all these neoclassical statues everywhere. And then 100 years later, we discovered that the ancients used to paint their statues, and so they did not have this very Spartan, cold white marble aesthetic everywhere. It was actually like it looked more like Hindu temples. Everything was painted, and it means the neoclassical reconstructions were totally not correctly reconstructed, and yet they were really awesome, and
They
they did
were.
it worked. And I think that's exactly what's happened with like Brownsteins and 1-to-1 play, which is I don't think they're actually the way those games were played back then, but I think they nevertheless have discovered something awesome about how they can be played.
Yeah,
So
I concur. I think their method of 1-to-1 time is really intriguing. I was actually like, as I was reading it, I was like, "Ooh, can I do this in Lone Wolf Fist with my montage stuff?" Bet I could.
yeah, you
So
probably could. Yeah. Yeah.
probably
Now,
could.
are you running Lone Wolf Fist? Oh, by the way, is that inspired at all by the Lone Wolf book
RPG.
series RPG?
It was not. It was actually coincidence. I just Lone Wolf just seemed like kind of a hokey like anime style name to me. And
Yeah,
then after I had committed to the name, and right before I got to the first Kickstarter, someone asked me that question, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was a solo RPG. They have
it
way
was.
better claim to the term lone wolf than I do. This is about groups of people doing stuff. Oops. So no, and please don't sue me. Because it's a really cool name. But no, it's not inspired by it. It's absolutely coincidental because lone wolf is pretty. I mean, you're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
just
yeah. It's a common term.
yeah.
It's actually fairly difficult to copyright and trademark titles,
Well, thank
because
God. So
Yeah, there's just a limited number of titles in the world, and so I believe trademark law actually excludes titles of books. Yeah, yeah. So let's see if we had any questions happen here while we've been chatting. So let's see here.
Got kind of into it for a while.
Science Miles says, check out a manga called Mad Archon. Not so cutesy. All right, thank you for the heads up on that. Omen Owl says, by the way, every time I see this name, I think it's Oh Me Now, but it's actually Omen.
Now?
It's actually Omen Owl, which is much cooler.
Oh.
So he says the Akira manga was so much better, but the anime movie was visually awesome.
Okay, so we got a lot to say about this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. So Katsuhiro Otomo, the guy who wrote the manga, was powerfully involved with the creation of the anime, and they were made at basically the same time. So there's a point in the anime where it diverges from the manga, and he completed the manga in a very different way. And in both cases, it's absolutely radical, and it's cool to have both of them. And I love them both so much that they're both in Lone Wolf Fists. You're welcome. And thank you, Otomo-san.
Awesome. I was just reminded of my brother who's actually watching this video, which is, he's much more expert on all things anime and manga than I am. And it's not infrequent that I will be like, oh, this was cool. And he will say, oh, yes, this was cool, but this was much cooler.
This was much cooler. Yeah, the equivalent of story topping. You will not go wrong if you read Otomo's Akira, though. It is a thick set of Bibles of books, and it's all brilliant.
Let's see. Everybody trades in kids' taekwondo belts. Yes, that would be amazing. I would be wealthy in this world. I have many taekwondo belts of all colors.
Of students that he beat to death.
So true story. My father took me to the Tang Sudo Open tournament in Philadelphia when I was a young man. And I had perfected a very cool technique, right? I had one technique I was really good at, which is I would do a roundhouse kick like this, coming in at like the knees or groin area. And then just as they dropped to block it, I would whip my knee back and then swing the roundhouse into their face. I was really, really good at that move. And I won my first round, just took the guy out, done, advanced the second round. But I hit the kid really hard and I gave him a bloody nose and knocked him down. And they gave me, they said, watch the contact. I was like, okay, I'm sorry. But I felt really bad because this kid walks out of the tournament room. He's got a bloody nose. And the referee was like, you don't have to make contact to get the point. Watch the contact. I'm like, okay, sorry. I'm only 14. And so I went into the next round and this time I didn't want to be that guy. And so I did my cool move and I brought it this close to the guy's face, but then I didn't hit him. I showed full control. And
nice.
And they didn't call the point. And so
robbed.
I was then off balance from having done my super awesome move, and they didn't call the point. And so the kid just goes, what, bam, and side kicks me full in the solar plexus, full force. And they gave him the point. And
you were robbed, sir.
I was robbed. And that was my lesson. That was a very early lesson in life, that when you're in a fight, don't expect to control contact and get the win. Win the fight and apologize to the referee later.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Miserable but correct. A sadder but a wiser man you woke tomorrow morning. And a much sorer one. Dude, solar plexus hits are awful.
Oh, man. All right, so we got a great question from Selftaught for you. How adaptable is Lone Wolf to non-apocalyptic settings, he asks.
Okay, so very explicitly, I was like, I wanted to make sure you could do your version of the game. So if you wanted to do Street Fighter or Avatar The Last Airbender or something like Trigun, which is not quite post-apocalyptic, more like Old Western, you can do all that. All of those powers and all the way they would realistically work in those settings, or not realistically, but like how they worked in those kind of fantastic settings, it's in Lone Wolf Fist. It's all there. And the way I write setting is very much just a bunch of charts that generate stuff for it. You could very much do any kind of game like that. Like if you like straight up want to do Avatar: The Last Airbender, all the bending styles are in the book, all of them. You firebenders, earthbenders, airbenders, etc. So like it's very, very flexible in that way. I provide the post-apocalyptic setting because that's what I put it in. But like it, much like early D&D, it's surprising how adaptable it is to different kinds of fantasy. as long as it's kind of like broadly like shonen wuxia style stuff,
Right.
it should
Right.
work.
Right. Yeah, post-apocalyptic as a setting is just really, really good for RPGs because um it gives you that reason why the best stuff is out there and not at Walmart,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want the best stuff to like you want the acquisition of cool stuff to be part of the hero's journey. You don't want it to be, let's go shopping.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and it's fine. Like, I think, oh, we're going to buy some masterwork weapons, and that's fine because it gives you
Yeah.
something to spend some money on. But 3.5, you would go to the magic store and spend your
Mhm.
money to buy your specific suite of magic items. It just was no good, for instance. All right, so we got another question. We got a question from Origin. Are you planning on discussing the various asuras in specificity? So
Um,
I'm
I detail 7 in the game. I give you the like a little hint of their backstory, what they're about, kind of like the religion that's built up around them. I give you all of their powers, which is what you inherit as a player character if you're one of their damned heroes and bear their Asheric brand, all the way up to the point where you can literally become one of them, rip through the belly of the cosmos, and go rampaging around in the world of ashes and ghosts proper. And I also give you the setting, which is their entire body in hell and its inhabitants. So hopefully that's sufficient. Uh, yes. So I guess yes, and I also give them to you in terms of gameplay.
so like their stats.
Oh yeah, not just their stats, but like everything about them. Because then they're not just stats, right? They're like a landscape. They're a religion. They're a bunch of.
Right.
They're a society of demons that live there, and you get all of it, and can be all of it. So I'm a madman. By the way, that's all written.
Can
So
you
if you
can
back,
but can you kill them? Can you fight them?
absolutely. Not only
That's
can you kill them, they were all except for one, they were all previously killed. So
yeah.
you can fist fight those things too. So if you're just interested in the villains, you can do that too. The only didn't die is Yama, who's already death. And that can become complicated. So you can beat him though, because he's only summoned through bureaucracy because he's part of the infernal
The
bureaucracy.
celestial bureaucracy. Sure, sure. So the power level for the game must be very high.
It gets pretty nuts. Yes. The very top power levels in the core book are basically the ability to nuke a city with a super blast. It's hard to use them because those are very expensive techniques that draw a lot of attention when you're powering up for them. But yeah, it gets kind of crazy. So I had to make rules where the setting didn't just disintegrate whenever you got to that point. But yeah, you can blow
Right.
up cities. And in this one, I do the tier that's right above there, where like not only can you disintegrate cities, you can be the city and go on a rampage and start swallowing hexes, basically.
Wow, that's epic. So how do you let's talk we got about 20 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit of nitty-gritty mechanics. So how do you make the
Yeah.
mechanics scale to work for that? Let's talk about that. Because that is a
Well, it,
tough challenge.
it is, but you and I have both used the same method, which is steal from phase rep. It works really well, right? They already kind of
I
pioneered that for us.
I actually stole more from Megs from Mayfair Exponential
Ooh.
Game System. Phase Rip I borrowed from more cosmetically. Megs, I thought the math was better. But I'm curious. So you took a Phase Rip type approach.
I did, and you're probably right, Megs. The math in phase rip is I discovered something about it when I was
Okay.
working with it. So I just took the phase rip charts and I was like, I'm going to use my version of these for my game because that was the
Yep.
easy way
Yep.
to do it, right? And it's not exactly that's not such well-worn design that it's like really familiar to people like it would be if I
No,
was doing
not at
a base
all.
attack
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bonus, right? So
Yeah.
I did that and I rewrote them for my game and I added a couple more tiers to them and I realized as I was going through them that there's a point where they're doing like a mathematical multiplier and it's a very linear progression of stuff happening. And I'm sure you kind of saw this too, but there's some point like somewhere about 2/3 through where that goes out the window and it becomes like exponential, but even more than exponential, it becomes like mythical. And I realized as I was redesigning these things that there was a point where even just if I was going to like do justice to anime or wuxia at all, I kind of had to abandon reality in terms of like physically like looking at things because like there's a point where like okay, sure, you could push a hole that's like fist shaped through a building, but punching a building down is a very different thing. And lifting one up and throwing it's also like that's not physically possible in any way. It's completely absurd. But
Right.
it happens, right? It happens in the cartoons, it happens in the myths. So there was a point in the charts where I was like, okay, this is where instead of it being a scientific progression, it becomes a mythological progression. That's what I
Mm,
did. The power level is scaled to the point of myth. And I made sure with a lot of very careful design that you weren't just ripping through the settings. So there's like rules for when you unleash setting annihilating power, what are the boundaries of that in terms of what the GM has to change in their prep? Like what NPCs vanish, what do they have to redraw in terms or rewrite in terms of like the description of areas, like the maps of areas. I used a lot of like non-map stuff. Like I rely on the theater of the mind is what it's called, I think, pretty commonly.
yeah,
Where like
yeah,
instead of having maps and a lot of detail like 3.5 has them, I always found those cumbersome. And I always like theater of the mind when you're doing dungeon crawls. I use that pretty extensively so that it's all descriptive. So you're not having to redraw maps, you're just having to change some descriptions here and there. And finally, I locked the real big setting changers under two very important locks. Lock number one was that the availability of those super powerful techniques is almost unheard of. Like
hmm,
basically, the most powerful characters in the setting have them, and good luck getting them from them without dying to them. So
right.
that was lock number one. You can't change the setting too much until you get to the end stage and beat the boss, basically. And lock number two is whenever you're powering up to use them, that sends out this blazing signal of energy. Like you're basically like powering up Goku style, and that makes encounter rolls happen really, really
Mm,
frequently. And
hmm.
there are big, big fish out there in the post-apocalypse. Like the Titans that are just a little bit smaller than the Ashura, they're out there and they notice you. The heads of the clans notice you. You know, the superpowers in hell notice you. The Sanzai, the things that kill immortals, notice you when you start using these powers. So that's another good lock to put those behind. It
Makes
makes
sense.
players right. It's consequential. Players are like, should I use the city annihilating power? Do I mean it? Do I want to have to risk dealing with the freaking Sanzai? Probably not.
Right, right, right. No, that makes sense. I do something similar with the Cataclysm spell in ACKS, where when you use it, the person upon whom you are bringing a cataclysm begins to detect omens of bad things
Oh,
happening, and
that's cool.
you're like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't give away the fact I intend to annihilate everything you love and cherish.
Well,
At
yeah,
least,
and the bigger a target you go for, the more minions they have that they're willing to sick on you too.
right,
There's no
right,
king without his like what 14th level thief assassin. Hey, go
yep,
and take care of this guy. He's
yeah,
trying to destroy the kingdom.
yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Yeah, when you have, the difference from our world and these fantasy worlds is that, in our worlds, we do have some badasses, but the level of badassery is much, much higher in the fantasy worlds.
Oh
And
yes.
so I think if you were accurately simulating those worlds, then the rulers would be much more personally powerful, right? Like
Mhm.
if you actually had men who could summon demons with their mind, then yeah, they probably would be in charge, you know.
Yeah.
You
Like,
know.
and if they want any kind of continuity in there, just complete nihilists, then yeah, that and like how stable is your kingdom when the guy that can summon demons with his mind is in charge? Like all hail Demon King. He's got
Yep.
my vote.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, he's got my vote. It's like we don't get to vote. It's not a democracy. He has it anyway.
Anyway, yeah, it's completely fine. Then he has my sword because I don't want to be on the wrong side of Demon King.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, it's funny. There's a TV trope for that, which is what is it? The personal power is political power. Um, and then they have the reverse trope: political power is personal power. And I guess they kind of work both ways in Axe, and it sounds like in your game as well.
Oh
So,
yeah,
all right.
again, another thing I stole from Axe. Thank you, Axe.
Hey, we got 10 minutes left. We got any questions from the audience here? Anybody want to harass Joel while they have him? I think if not, what we're going to do is ask him to demonstrate kung fu moves.
Oh
I
Jesus.
figure with 10 minutes. So you said you could do 2 hours of the horse stance punching.
Okay, I might be able to get up to all the way to 5 minutes. Let me get some incense sticks. So you're supposed to do it with the lighting of, I think it's 3 incense sticks or 6 incense sticks. I'm gonna do three. I'm just gonna. Oh God, can I even do a horse stance? Let me look. Let me see. Do this off camera. Let's see if we can do this.
The horse stance is hard, right? Like that's the one where you
Oh
have to
boy.
get really wide and deep.
Yeah. Well, it's not super. It's a little bit like I can do shoulder length, which is the Hungar Klon one. Oh Jesus. Yep, I can do them. Oh God. I'm not gonna though. I'm just
Now,
gonna sit back down and cry a little bit quietly to myself. Oh my God. Oh, okay, we're not gonna do the kung fu demonstration.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so North says, have you told Second someone already has done an axe-inspired wushu? No, I
Ooh,
haven't. I am so disappointed that Second did not come to this chat. He really should have come. So, but presumably he'll find out about it later, and he will come and embrace. Actually, he's been working on a similar game for a long time. So, if nothing else, he should check out your game to see what you've been up to.
yeah, man. Oh yeah,
Um,
look, we got a couple.
let's see. Origin says, who's your favorite of the robot types?
Ooh, let me see. I like the ones with heads that aren't human heads. Like they have more or less humanoid bodies, but their heads are like engine blocks or television sets or something like that. So like the art I commissioned, if you look on the Kickstarter page, the guy's got an engine block with like a little smiley face drawn on it. That's my favorite kind. I would say that's the best kind because it's just uncanny enough that you get that they're a robot. So they're not in the uncanny valley yet. Like they're not like
Right,
eerie.
right.
They seem friendlier because they've got like pistons for a head.
Yeah,
That's my
yeah,
favorite kind.
absolutely, absolutely. All right, then we got Omen Owl says, can he help you flesh out a Chinese style setting for Axe in the future? I mean, I would imagine he could. I certainly have
Probably.
not watched. What was the name of this movie director? Shaw.
Yeah, the Shaw Brothers.
Shaw Brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trust me, you'll very quickly see that logo that they have is going to be emblazoned in your skull if you watch any of their stuff. They made God, there had to have been over 100 movies from
Oh
the 70s and 80s.
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot, dude. They churned them out, and they had like certain actors that they were like really they were staples of the genre because they just would keep going into the Shaw
Right.
Brothers movies.
So
Um,
were these big inspirations for Tarantino then? The Shaw Brothers?
Oh yeah, dude. If you see any Shaw Brothers films and then you watch Kill Bill, you're like, oh, that's why you did the Shaw Brothers logo at the front. I get it. I get it
Uh,
now. Uh,
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I had heard that basically to understand Quentin Tarantino, you have to spend a lifetime watching 70s movies in a VCR shop, and then
yeah,
like
I think that's
only
about
then.
right.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like I just don't know enough exploitation films somehow to fully appreciate his greatness.
Yeah, I love me some exploitation films. But yeah, I mean, and you could do that, or you could just watch Tarantino films, which kind of give you the essence of all of these things. Like Kill Bill is, in terms of it being a wuxia movie, is pretty great, honestly. Like it pretty much has all the tropes.
Yeah, but her power level is much lower relative to what you're
Well,
talking about.
remember, so wuxia is the lower scale to the mid scale, and then Shansha is mid to high, and then it gets kind of
Ah,
kooky after a certain.
I see.
But yeah,
Oh,
so yeah, the more gritty, grounded wuxia films, absolutely,
I
especially
see.
with the
Okay.
heart exploding palm technique. I love that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I like if I was a billionaire, I would absolutely be willing to devote $1 million into investigating whether any of these ancient kung fu tactics are real, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Good money well spent. Have your
right?
own kung fu superheroes.
Would you not do that? Like, just be like, okay, we're gonna go to Tunisia. We're gonna buy like an old Roman amphitheater in Tunisia, and we're gonna have like blood sport, blood fist kung fu contest to prove which fighting style is actually the best. Blah blah blah.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
like mixed martial arts are like, oh, it proves grappling is the best. Well, it's only true because that you're not allowed to use the striking moves that actually kill you, right? Like you couldn't actually use the dim mock in mixed martial arts, even if it worked, right? So we'll never know.
That's
So
true.
Blocky Blah says that's how the UFC started. Right, but could you use dim mock in the UFC?
Could you?
I don't know. I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I
See.
wasn't there. If so, that would have been really awesome, and I definitely would have done pay-per-view to see that. Like
Oh yeah.
some vibrating palm shit. All right, let's see. What are the best fantastic high fantasy kung fu films? Uh-oh. I think we've lost Joel. He is frozen in space-time. Uh-oh. Well, I certainly don't know the answer to this question.
Oh, am I back?
Oh, he's back. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. It gave me a moment too. I'm in Alaska, so every once in a while, like a moose will step on the line.
Oh,
Um.
you're in Alaska? I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. No. This is like 6 p.m. for me. It's early. I'm about to go have dinner.
Oh, nice. Okay.
What is that one? She Warriors or no, Zui Warriors is probably the best one. I think that's what it's called. I can't remember the name of that. There's a few of them here. The Journey to the West ones are always really good. Those are kind of dip into Shansha, so I'd recommend those. What else? I'm trying to think of some really good high-powered ones. Like, it's only recently have we really had the tech to do what's in like the stories. So a lot of the recent kung fu films have like more. What was that one with the? I think it's called White's. Is it White Snake or is that a band from the 80s? It's something.
White
It's like the
Snake is
White Snake.
definitely a band from the 80s, but
Yeah, yeah. Zoo Warriors of the Magic Mountain. That's one. Adam, thank you. By the way, also hi, Adam. Good to see you. Yeah, that's what it's called. Oh, what is it called? I think it's called like the White Snake Bride or something like that. Goodness, you got me on the spot here.
all right,
But yeah,
all right.
that's a really good one.
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. How powerful are they on a wushu scale?
On a Wuxia scale, I'd say they're pretty decent. They can't throw like energy blasts from their hands, so I wouldn't say they're on the higher level scale. I'd say they're about mid. If I had to give it 3 tiers of like gritty and pulpy versus like wire fu versus like actual energy attacks,
And
they're
they're at wire
they're in the
fu.
middle. They're at
Yeah.
wire fu. Yeah.
Wire fu, yeah, because they're doing like the dancing on the tree limbs and whatnot.
Yep, and
Right.
that shows that they have Lightfoot style mastered, and there's some discussion about cultivation and things like that. But like the guy dies because he gets hit with a poison needle.
Right.
You know, that's you've not mastered the Buddha's palm technique.
Right. Let's see.
Say Legend of the Drunken Master, probably 47 Ronin is great.
Yep.
And hi, Sly Blue, good to see you too.
How
I don't
about
know Ricky O.
Yeah, I don't
Legend of
know.
the Drunken Master, I would say, is Wuxia. Isn't Legend of the Drunken Master the one where he like does that kung fu scene where he's like stomping through the stone tiles while he's throwing punches? That's pretty rad.
Yeah, I
I
haven't
would
seen
give
that.
it a shot.
This is a
That's
huge
good.
it's like a blind spot in my nerd training. I feel like I need to immediately get off this and go tell my wife that instead of having dinner and Netflix tonight, we're going to be watching Shaw Brothers kung fu movies.
You can do worse than Shaw Brothers. Some of them are really good too. So
Yeah. And then after the divorce, I'll have more time to work on my enlightenment and kung fu skills.
not how I would recommend gaining more yin chi.
It's the one where Jackie Chan gets kicked into the hot coals and catches fire. Yeah, Legend of the Drunken Master is hilarious. So wait, now Jackie Chan, does he count? I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of Jackie Chan movies.
I think Jet Li counts. Like the one is definitely like magical.
Yeah, the one is great. That's good fun. Yeah.
Yeah, Jackie Chan's like it's like Bruce Lee in that like his stuff is kind of rooted in his actual physical capabilities and not
Right.
so.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say that's like lower pulpier scale.
Yeah.
Forbidden Kingdom, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Again, you can see Jet Li's influence there.
Right. Yeah, he's just an impressive specimen as a human being. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's probably a good place to stop, especially since we're starting to have some internet connection problems with you there.
Yeah, the Moose are getting. I think the ninja masters who were supposed to assassinate me for revealing kung fu techniques have found me, so I got to fight them off. So after that,
that's
we'll get
exactly
back
what
to
I was
Kickstarter.
thinking was happening. Is probably because you told us about the red sand dust. What was it? The
Oh yeah, the red sand palm. Yeah, don't please don't actually use that to ruin their ninja empires.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, everyone. Make sure you back Joel's Kickstarter. Do it sooner rather than later because he may be killed using the vibrating palm technique for revealing these secrets and designing this game. And we want to honor his sacrifice. Hey man, thanks so much for coming on Axe to Grind. It's been great having you on, and
Awesome.
thanks everyone for tuning in. And we'll catch you all next week with more Axes to Grind. Cheers for now.